Hey guys, Excoundrel here. Today I'm doing an in-depth video on positioning and also placement of your units. But before we do that, Autochess Mobile is now out on iOS. You need to search for Autochess, or if you can't find it that way, search for For Freedom, click on that app, then click on the developer of the app, and then you should be able to find Autochess Mobile. Pretty self-explanatory. In this video, we're going to be covering the bottom half of the chessboard, the placement area, which you can see highlighted in red. I'll leave a box up so you know that exactly what I'm talking about. These are the areas that you can put your units. We're going to start off with early game positioning, and this is a very basic early game position. Your tanks are in the front and your DPS is at the back. The closer to the center of the board your units are, the more likely they are to take damage. So you can see Axe and Tusker right now are the ones that are most likely to take damage in this scenario. However, we want the units with the most powerful abilities taking the damage so they get their abilities off earlier. So I would switch my Skull Hunter and my Swordman, as we want those guys to take damage. They're tanky because of the Cave Clan bonus, and we want them to get their ultimates off. So when you're placing your units, think about the abilities that they have and how quickly you want them to use them in the fight. In general, you really want people with high impact abilities in the center. Pieces towards the edge of the chessboard will take less damage. Pieces towards the center are more likely to take damage. That's a general rule of thumb when it comes to placing units. If you have no squishy DPS pieces and you have a beefy lineup like mechs and warriors, you can use something like a simple line formation. This is where you just stack all of your units up as close to the center of the board as possible in a straight line, a straight horizontal line. This gives you a consistent engage pattern where most abilities will charge at the same time. When it comes to placement of the individual units within this line, we want to make sure that we have the units with area of effect in the middle. So Ripper with an area of effect ability, and also Skybreaker, who can stun in an area of effect as well. We want those guys in the middle because they are more likely to have more impact with their ultimates or their abilities. If you're playing full assassins and you want your assassins to jump to the enemy backline, they must be positioned towards the back of your chessboard. This will mean they will automatically jump to the backline of your enemy and try and seek out the squishy targets. There are other ways that you can play assassins in the early game. For instance, in this particular lineup, and especially works with Phantom Queen and Water Spirit, you have a front line of tanks. You might just have one or two assassins. I like to pick up Phantom Queen for this exact reason, and you place them just behind your front line. The reason is because they are ranged, they will automatically start attacking the enemy front line, and when they cast their abilities, it will hit as many people as possible as opposed to just targeting the enemy backline. This can be very powerful for Phantom Queen especially, and she will definitely help you win early rounds when positioned like this. This is a more advanced position in the early game. If you have a unit that you need to cast an ability but you don't want them to be swarmed by enemy units, you can put them towards the side of the board but with a gap next to them in between your front line. This means that they will take some damage and gain mana quickly, but they won't get swarmed like Red Axe on the right hand side of our board here, and it means that the transformation of Werewolf will happen. This is good for things like Werewolf and Razorclaw because you're giving them space to transform, but you're also allowing them to survive long enough to get that transformation off. So let's talk about some mid-game positioning, and this is one of my favorite positions to use, the ladder position. This is a great multi-purpose mid-game strategy. This is really good against pretty much anything that you can throw at you, and really has very few weaknesses. This allows you to control which units take the most damage. In this case, it's going to be our Seer and our Warpwood Sage, and it also controls which units you want to protect, in this case, Lightblade Knight and Wind Ranger. So, like I said, for this example, our Sage and our Seer are going to be taking the most damage because they are in the center portion of our board. They are the ones that are closest to the center of our chessboard. Then we have this ladder diagonal line protecting our backline carries who are stuck against the wall on the left hand side, being the least likely to take damage. This is also a good position against assassins because they are jumping into the spaces behind your front line, and sometimes your front line will turn around and start to attack them. You can also modify it to make sure that it's even safer versus assassins. In this particular example, I've moved my Taboo Witcher over to the back and center to make sure that if an assassin jumps to the back line, my Taboo Witcher will be there to defend. This is the anti-wolves position. On round 15, you will face the neutral wolves round, and if anybody that watches my video, you'll realise that I always miss this. But this is a simple position to make sure that you survive this round. You put your back line of low health carries towards the top of your board and your tanks towards the bottom like this. The wolves jump over your entire lineup and will start attacking your tanks first, and this is very much the opposite to the way that normal chess rounds play out unless you are playing versus assassins. If you know that you're playing versus an assassin player, you can actually play a lineup a little bit like that, and the assassin player might jump over it and head towards your tanks first. You can also use the line position, the horizontal line position, for the mid-game too. In this case, you can see we have all of our warriors, and it's especially good when you have tanky warriors. We put Swordman and Pirate in the middle as we want them to cast their abilities quickly, but we can keep all of the warriors in a line because we want them to engage as quickly as possible, and they're all tanky, so we don't have to really worry about positioning or protecting. We keep Werewolf and Doom on the outside so they take a little bit less damage, but they have space to cast their abilities like Werewolf, but they also get enough damage to be able to be impactful. So the line positioning is perfectly fine for warriors in the mid-game too. Let's talk about another mid-game strategy. This is the corner position. This is a very basic protective strategy where you put your low HP carries in the corner and you surround them with units that are high HP like the tanks. When you don't have enough units to fully fill out the corner, you can do a kind of wraparound corner like you see here. The units that are in the mid and center will be engaged upon first and usually will keep your backline pretty safe. For instance, you can see Pirate Captain is the most likely to receive damage here, and we want that because we want him to cast his ultimate. The units towards the center will be protecting our backline, unless versus assassins. This isn't as good as the ladder position versus assassins, but in general it is pretty good versus almost any other composition. And with these front lines protecting, it gives you your time for your backline DPS to get the damage out. This is one of the most basic strategies that you can use. It's good for mages, it's good for Glacier Clan, it's good for hunters, it's good for anything with ranged DPS, if I'm honest. So if you're ever worried about how to position when you've got the squishier ranged carries, the corner strategy is a good go-to, and it will serve purpose throughout the majority of the game. Corner formations can take many forms, like this. You can move it so they are completely encompassing your backline carries. It really doesn't matter too much. As long as your front line are essentially covering the backline, they are almost always going to be engaged upon before your backline. For instance, enemy warrior compositions will never get through to your backline without going through your front line first. That's why it's important to have a strong front line when you're playing a ranged DPS position. So now we're going to talk about late game and advanced positioning. This is called the CC and AoE first position. So you can see here, it's important to get big impact abilities off in the late game. It's less about putting your tanky units forward, and it's more about making sure that the units that are going to have the most impact charge their abilities quickly and can have the impact in the fights. You must ensure that the units that you are putting towards the front have enough HP to survive. For instance, a Siren level 1 will probably die before she gets her ultimate off in this position, but a Siren level 2 will likely survive long enough. Dark Spirit also has a really impactful ultimate, and you want them to cast that as soon as possible, so putting them towards the front is going to allow them to charge their ability more quickly. This is called a split formation with your auto attackers in the back. This is good versus things like mages and Dark Spirit. You want to split up your important carries to make sure they aren't all killed in a massive AoE ability like the Dark Spirit ability or like anything that mages can throw at you. You keep your frontline and impactful units towards the front, and you also then split up your backline carries to make sure they aren't killed in one foul swoop. This isn't great versus assassins, but it is good versus things like mages, Black Dragon King round, and also versus the Dark Spirit, like I said. This is called the vertical line position, and you can see here this is a really odd position, but it's very, very specific and only used in certain circumstances. This allows your backline range carries to focus the targets directly in front of them, and it's generally there to help you focus fire on important targets that you want to take out. Wind Ranger and Berserker will kill Tsunami Stalker here, and then my Agersis Ranger and my Helicopter will end up killing Siren. This is very weak versus Assassins, as is a lot of those kind of formations which expose your backline because they are not protected and they will be isolated very quickly. However, if you're not facing Assassins, this can be a good way to focus fire some specific targets on the enemy front line. Another thing to consider is 1v1 positioning, and this is especially good late game when you're running things like human synergies and also Taboo Witcher. In this particular example, you can see that I have my Pirate King lined up to the Siren and I have my Taboo Witcher lined up to the Tsunami Stalker. The idea here is that the Taboo Witcher will start attacking Tsunami Stalker, stealing his mana and stopping him from casting his ultimate or his ability as quickly, and I potentially, with the human bonus, can silence the Siren, meaning that she can't cast her ability either. You want to delay or outright stop really impactful enemy abilities. A full corner composition, like I said, is very, very common late game, with the low HP high damage carries in a box at the back. This is very common for mages and hunters, and also fairly common for knights. You can see that the positioning can be tinkered around with. You want your Tsunami Stalker high enough up so that he casts his ultimate, but you want to box in those ranged carries at the back, making them hard to get to. This is weak to AoE, and that's why versus things like Dark Spirit, you might consider going for a split formation. Remember to experiment, find what works for you, and I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a quick pit stop guide to positioning. Feel free to go back and pause if you want any examples. I put a lot of text in there. Like and subscribe and hit the bell. This took me ages to do. And I also hope if you're coming from iOS, you enjoy the game. It's a really, really good game, and I thoroughly recommend checking out Claytano too. He's a really, really good content creator. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'll see you soon.